I hear,
Okay.
I do too.
You do. Oh, see, it's Jennifer in my head.
Yeah. And we are actually live. So
Oh,
hi,
we're live.
everyone.
So
Hey, behind the scenes with your favorite authors.
Who hears that sound? Just me?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookstore Romance Day. Welcome to our panel on writing science fiction fantasy crossover with romance, which is what we all do. Our wonderful Grace Draven is having some technical difficulties, so hopefully she'll be able to jump in and join us. Yes, everybody cross their fingers, sacrifice a chocolate chip cookie to the gods of the internet. And in the meantime, I would like everyone to introduce themselves, although we'll take a moment and say happy birthday, Darynda. Great
Thank
way
you.
to spend your birthday being here with
Happy
us.
birthday.
Thank you. And happy almost birthday, Jeffe. Hers is tomorrow.
Yeah, it's my birthday eve. So Darynda and I are like almost birthday twinsies. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Jeffe Kennedy. I am the current president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. I am also a romance writer, so I'm big into crossover. And I have a number of different series. I write fantasy romance or romantic fantasy primarily. Most recently, I have come out with the Bonds of Magic series, Dark Wizard and Bright Familiar, and then also the Heirs of Magic series. And recently from St. Martin's, I just completed the Forgotten Empires trilogy with The Promised Queen coming out in May. And so now I will go to, I'm going to finish texting our bookstore person. Our bookstore sponsor is Beastly Books, and you can see the green button at the bottom that says buy books from Beastly Books. If you search, you should be able to find all of the books, but they're not showing the way we'd like. So that's why I'm going to text our bookstore manager really quick. But please do check out Beastly Books and order books from them. It's a great bookstore here in my hometown of Santa Fe, Darynda's home state of New Mexico. And also, I will point you to the Ask a Question button at the bottom there. Feel free to ask questions. We're not being terribly scripted today. We're going to talk about our favorite stuff, books. And so we're happy to entertain any and all questions. And let's see. So let's go. Amanda, Jennifer, Darynda, please introduce yourselves and your books.
Okay. Thank you, Jeffe. So my name is Amanda Bouchet. I live in Paris. So you have this bright evening light coming in on me, actually. I look a little bright in the picture. I write fantasy romance, and I also have a series that's more of a futuristic space opera romance. Both are definitely romance. I love my hero and heroine to get together and go on rollicking adventures. So my fantasy series is called The Kingmaker Chronicles, and there's a completed trilogy that starts with The Promise of Fire. And that book is, those books are set in a world that's based on Greek mythology. So we have a lot of Greek mythological elements that come into play, but it's its own world as well. So I use them in the way that I want to, and that's fun for me. And for the readers, hopefully. And it all comes together to make a big epic adventure. And so that is a completed trilogy, and I'm working on a fourth book in that world now, which is a spin-off, but it's really closely related to the characters and the story of the trilogy. And then the Night Chaser series is more of a futuristic fantasy with, I like to call it my Star Wars meets Robin Hood space adventure. There are shoot 'em up space battles. There is a space cat. There is a bounty hunter with shady past, and a female Robin Hood type captain who is out to stick it to the evil overseer in any way she can as she zooms across the galaxy trying to do good. So basically, lots of fun, lots of adventure, steamy times, and I hope you'll check out my books if you don't know them already. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Jennifer Estep. I write the Elemental Assassin Urban Fantasy series, which is about an assassin who runs a barbecue restaurant. I also have several different other series. I have a couple of young adult series, Mythos Academy and Black Blade. I have my big time superhero series, which is very much a superhero spoof. And lately I've been writing epic fantasy. I have Kill the Queen and the other books in my Crown of Shards series, which is like Gladiator meets Game of Thrones. And then my most recent book is Capture the Crown, which came out in July. And this is the first book in my Gargoyle Queen fantasy series. So thank you. I write a little bit of all the kinds of fantasy.
Awesome. I am Darynda Jones. I write paranormal mystery with tons of romance. I write paranormal women's fiction. I write straight mystery with romance and comedy and all of that. I write young adult. So yeah, I write all over the place too. My indie series is Betwixt and Between, and that's paranormal women's fiction. And then I just had the second in my mystery series with St. Martin's Press. It came out. It's called A Good Day for Chardonnay. And that's me.
So I guess that's everybody, except we still have no Grace, sadly. I spoke to the bookstore manager, and he was like, they're not showing it. I can't believe it. So he's running to his computer now. And so we will hopefully have all of those books showing soon. So before we go to questions, and we do have a few questions so far, but I want to ask each of you how you ended up writing crossover to romance. I know that it's not exactly something that any of us planned necessarily, but I'd like to hear how you ended up writing cross genre, and I don't know, how did you think it was a good idea? Let's start with Darynda.
Oh, you know what? I just that's just the stories that came into my head. I don't really think it was a purposeful decision, although I will say that once I started it, I was questioned about it. And so I did kind of question it, because back in the day, they were like, oh no, you don't want to cross genres. That's death for your career. You can't do that. And I'm like, but isn't kind of almost everything cross genre in a way? I mean, because you have even the old school historical romances, they were all full of suspense and they had mystery, you know? So is anything really just one genre and you must stick with it? Even romantic suspense, that's two genres right there. So it was a purposeful decision, but I did question it. But then when I sold, I didn't care anymore. So I just write whatever what I want.
Well, you know, and it's an interesting question, like what is romance that's not cross genre? Is that just contemporary romance, or is it historical romance? Is that is that the pure romance? I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jennifer?
Well, I will say that when I was growing up, my two favorite shows were The A-Team and Saved by the Bell. So you have the action and the adventure in one, and then you have like Zach kind of chasing after Kelly in the other one. So I've always loved stories, movies, books, TV shows with, you know, a little bit of everything in them: action, adventure, danger, romance. And then I really have always loved, you know, fantasy-based stuff too, superheroes and assassins and everything. So when I started writing, it would just seem like a natural fit for me to just kind of, you know, put all the things that I love to read and watch in the books that I write.
Makes sense.
Yes.
What about you, Amanda?
A bit like Jennifer, I think I was influenced by what I watched growing up. I was madly in love with Harrison Ford, and so had a steady diet of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and basically that's what I write. So you've got
so genre is Harrison Ford.
Just the heart of the genre. So,
I have a whole different worldview of you now.
oh my gosh, I would make up stories everywhere I went, often alone. I guess I was kind of a loner. I don't know, but Harrison Ford would star in my every adventure. And of course, I was the heroine. So, and that's basically what I write. You've got these swashbuckling adventures with, a huge dose of action, adventure, and high stakes, and do or die, death is looming type of situations. And you've got your, smoking hot, steamy romance with your hero that is, a heart of gold, but a bit ambiguous as well, and, a bit of a rogue. So yeah, now that I think about it, it's kind of all coming together for me. I sort of knew this in the back of my head somewhere, but this is the first time I've actually put that to words. So yeah, I love the roguish hero. He's strong, but he's got his sensitive side too, and he's got the romance. So I guess so.
And you've got the whole "my hands are dirty" moment.
Annie has
the whole stealing the kiss against the wall of the spaceship, and
yeah, Annie has a whip too, so that's a whole different other thing we could talk about.
And my hero Griffin in my first book, he caught the heroine with a magic rope. Oh my gosh, it's all just my mind is blown.
see, this is like educational as well for our panelists. So for me, like I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy. I did not read romance until much later because I had, my mother thought that romance was trash, so she was like, don't read those books. And, very feminist mother who had that misguided idea, as many women did at that time, and a few still do. But, so I loved when I could find heroine driven science fiction and fantasy, like where she was more than the trophy. And like if there was a roguish handsome hero involved as well, then that was like my catnip. So
yeah, even better,
right? Yeah. And so like Anne McCaffrey and Mercedes Lackey and all of these even Anne Rice, with like the wonderful sensual paranormal stuff. So when I first started writing fiction, because I'd been in nonfiction for a long time, and then I decided to just have fun and write fiction, this thing that came out was like this weird mix of fantasy and romance that I thought was totally awesome and amazing. And then when I tried to sell it, everybody was like, this isn't anything. This is
yeah.
And it's so strange because we were seeing it and people loved it. It was very popular on screens. I mean, remember the original Battlestar Galactica as well? Mm-hmm. I mean, I love the reboot they did also. And then,
I had a poster of Dirk Benedict on my bedroom wall, and he had his jeans a little bit unfastened. It was very salacious.
Oh, yes.
Dirk Benedict from the A-Team.
That's right.
Yes. He's in the
A-Team. That's right. Oh, that was so good, guys.
There's a common influence here, isn't there?
Yeah. There is.
Our sexuality is Dirk Benedict and Harrison Ford.
Are we dating ourselves a little bit here, though?
Well, they knew that about us already, theoretically. All right, so let's see. Let's look at some questions. Amanda Darynda, what are you most enjoying about your work in progress? Whatever that is. So go ahead and say what your work in progress is.
Who's starting?
Okay. You go ahead, Amanda.
Okay.
Sorry.
My work in progress is currently, so for people who've already read the Kingmaker Chronicles trilogy, it is the first spin-off to that series. And so that's dealing with the beta team characters, if you're familiar with that. And if you're not, it's no big deal because I'm trying to write it so you could jump into the series now. But I also think you'd get a lot more out of it if you read the original trilogy. So so go ahead and do that.
Which is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So good.
So what am I enjoying most about it? In terms of what? The writing process or the story itself?
That was, you now know as much about the question as I do. So,
well, what I'm enjoying right now is actually getting the ending down on paper. Well, paper being the computer, but this book has taken me a really, really long time to write. It was hard. It was hard to switch back into that world, even though I'd been wanting to do that. And then it was just stops and starts all along. And so I always describe my writing as I'm like a steam train. Once you get the engine hot, I'm just chugging right along. But if the engine never really gets hot, it's like, it's a slow crawl and I don't really get anywhere. So I finally heated up the engine again, I will say, in the last week. And I've just been barreling towards the finish line. And I'm so enjoying that because it's kind of like the feeling where I got my mojo back a bit after a while where I love writing. I always want to write, but it wasn't happening easily.
Right.
So I'm really enjoying getting the end of the story. It all coming, and plus it's the ending. So it's all coming together, all the things that had to happen and all the emotions and all the plot lines and everything are, wrapping up into this ending, and it's exciting.
Nice. Very cool.
What about you, Darynda? What is your work in progress?
Well, my work in progress is the third in the Sunshine Vikram series, which is called A Hard Day for a Hangover.
Ooh, nice title.
Well, let me tell you, I put this out there because I'd come up with, my editors came up with A Bad Day for Sunshine. Then I came up with A Good Day for Chardonnay, but I couldn't come up with a third one. I put it out there, and Jeffe came up with A Hard Day for a Hangover. That was her title.
Because it is on brand for me.
Right.
I've also had to give her important beta feedback on like mixing red and white wine and other niceties of drinking.
I did not know that you weren't supposed to do that. So that became a really good joke in the second book. So I guess for me right now, I'm in that part. So the first third of my book takes at least 2/3 of the time. It's that where you're just trying to get the train going, just trying to get it. And I had about not quite 10,000 words. I ended up deleting almost all of that. I had to go back. Jeffy's been going through this with me. I feel bad. And now I think I'm at like 3,000 words for my opening part. But it's just like, I just couldn't get there. But now I'm finally the train is starting to go. So I'm in a good place, and I love my hero so much. So I'm at a scene where he comes in and it's super, super steamy. So I'm in a good place.
Well, and so, Jennifer, why don't you talk, what are you working on too?
So any day now, I am supposed to get copy edits on Tear Down the Throne, which is book 2 in my Gargoyle Queen epic fantasy series. So this is the point where I'm like really, really sick of the book and like I never want to look at it again. So I'm looking forward to when I get the copy edits. That means I only have to read through the whole book 2 more times for the copy edits and the page proofs, and I will be so glad when that is done. And I never, like I said, after that, I never have to look at it again. But author nitpickiness aside, I'm glad this is really the start of the process where I feel like it's, turning into a real book, when you get the copy edits and the revisions are done, and now you're just kind of fixing and tweaking and doing all the little fiddly bits that really just can, elevate your book a little bit more and hopefully make it a little bit more enjoyable for readers. So that's what I'm working on right now. And if Darynda needs more titles, like what about A Sweet Day for Sangria?
Oh, how cute is that?
I love it.
Yeah, we
can all riff on these titles.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, I'm writing the third book in the Heirs of Magic series. And so this is, for those of you who have been reading the series, this is Jendra's book. And it's been a mystery if she would ever find anyone. And so I'm actually at the sweet spot of the book where there turns out to be a scene that's like Draw Me Like You're a French Girl's scene, which I've never actually gotten to write before. And it's I feel like that's not too spoilery. I hope that wasn't too spoilery. But Draw Me Like Your French Girl Scene, it's been so much fun to write. I'm just having the best time. It was
That's
like
awesome.
just yesterday afternoon, and then I went and had to have a cold beer.
So for those who don't know, Jeffe and I write together every day, and we meet on Zoom and we write. We do 3 1-hour sprints usually. And it was so funny because the last book she was writing, it was just hilarious because she'd come back on and she was like, whew, this book is going in directions I did not know it was going to go. This man is like, he's very virile, it was so funny. I was laughing at her so hard.
Now, I think I'm actually blushing now.
It was just so fun to watch.
Yeah, we get on Zoom together. It's been great. Okay, so this is a great question for everyone. For new readers who, impossible as it seems, may not have discovered you yet, where should they start with your books? Jennifer.
Okay.
Oh, she's ready. Look, she's like snagging
Look at
her book.
her, yeah.
I have like a whole stack of books over here that you cannot even see. So I will. Oh, I've done like 7 panels in a week. I'm just like,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
ready to go. I would suggest if you like epic fantasy with a little bit of romance, you could start with Kill the Queen, which is
Grace.
hey, there's Grace.
Okay, keep going, Jennifer. Hi,
Okay.
Grace.
So you can start with Kill the Queen, which is the first book in my Crown of Shards epic fantasy series, and it's basically Gladiator meets Game of Thrones with wait for it, Jeffe, say it with me, with a kick butt heroine.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So
I
you can
tease
start with
Jennifer because every single one of her pitches is this plus this with a kick butt
the
heroine.
kick butt heroine. Yeah. So yeah, you can start with Kill the Queen, the first book in my Crown of Shards series.
Okay, and let's take a pause and have the mysterious, dramatically and fashionably late Grace Draven introduce herself and tell us what you write, Grace. Talk about your books a little bit. And since the question we're currently addressing is, if readers have never heard of you, where should they start with your books?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm Grace Draven, obviously technically challenged. I went ahead and yanked my husband out of the bed and said, you come fix this shit because I can't. So we had to resort to the laptop, which didn't seem to have the same problem as my phone. I bought this brand new phone and it's shit. So excuse my French. I'm just sort of pissed at the moment.
Isn't that what I said at the beginning?
It's a brand new phone too. So anyway, okay, no more complaining. I write fantasy romance, and I think probably in a couple of cases romantic fantasy, although I know those two sort of have very fluid borderlines. I'm considered a hybrid publisher, or a hybrid author. So I'm with a traditional publisher for a trilogy. I'm with Penguin Random House, and I have the Fallen Empires trilogy with them. And the first book in that one is Phoenix Unbound. The second one is Dragon Unleashed. And the third one, which will be coming out very soon, is called Raven Unveiled. And then I also self-publish, and probably my most well-known book is Radiance, which is the first book in a 6-book series called Wraith Kings. And I have multiple novellas and some short stories. I've participated with all of these ladies, with the exception of Darynda, but that's coming up, in anthologies. And I've written a steampunk story as well, sort of a steampunk gothic. So I would probably say if anybody was going to start with anything of mine, if they're not familiar with it, then I would probably say go with the one that readers seem to really like the best, and that's Radiance. It's not my favorite of the ones I've written, because my favorite is a Beauty and the Beast retelling called Entreat Me. So if you like those, you can start with Entreat Me, but otherwise maybe consider Radiance as the first one.
Cool.
All right. Darynda.
Gosh. Okay. I would say if you like paranormal, probably start with the first Charlie Davidson. It was my first book that I sold. It's called First Grave on the Right. If you like more just straight mystery with romance and comedy, all of my books have comedy in them, just so you know. Then I would start with A Bad Day for Sunshine.
What about you, Amanda?
Well, I think I have less books than all of you guys do, so there aren't as many choices yet, but they're coming. So if you're interested in more of a sort of epic fantasy romance type book, I would start with the Kingmaker Chronicles with The Promise of Fire. And to use Jennifer's formula a little bit, it's sort of like Greek mythology meets Game of Thrones with a kick-butt
With
heroine.
a kick-butt heroine.
Kick-butt heroine, yeah. I'm going to make that my catchphrase.
I can show you. So now you're seeing my bookshelf, but there we go. So since we're holding up book covers, this is the first one in that series. And actually, if you're an ebook reader, the box set of the original trilogy, book 2 also, and book 3, the box set is currently on sale for something ridiculous, like $3.99, I think. So if you're an ebook reader, you could look for the Kingmaker Chronicles box set, and that's like, you're probably never going to get a better deal. But otherwise, the paperbacks are also gorgeous and look like this with our kick-butt heroine, right? And if you're interested in the sort of futuristic world I described earlier with the Robin Hood female captain meets sort of a Star Wars world with a roguish bounty hunter and a kick-butt heroine, you could look for, this is Starbreaker, this is book 2, and Night Chaser is the first book in the series. So Night Chasers, either Night Chaser or A Promise of Fire, depending on which series whichever one, tickles your fancy at the moment.
Cool.
All right, so I'll show a couple of mine. Dark Wizard just came out this year, and a lot of people love this one. It's a brand new world and magic system, so
Really
it's a
good.
good place to start on mine. Fantasy. I think mine are all fantasy at this point. Or tradition. So I'm hybrid also, so that's self-published. And then The Orchid Throne with the pretty shiny cover is the first book in the St. Martin's trilogy, Forgotten Empires. That's a whole fresh world, so it's a good place to start. If you want to go back in the oeuvre, The Bark of the Tala was sort of my first big book that a lot of people are familiar with. And that moves into, you can either just read the trilogy or you can keep going. And then The Pages of the Mind is my one that won the Rita. So I even put my little Rita sticker on there. And I think that one's still Grace's personal favorite, but just because of the library heroine, I think.
Very cool. I was going to say one more thing real quick that I just found out yesterday. St. Martin's is doing something they've never done for me. They're actually putting the 2 books I just recommended, First Grave on the Right and A Bad Day for Sunshine, in Kindle Unlimited. They've never done that. So if you are part of Kindle Unlimited, I don't know when, I'm going to say sometime within the next couple of weeks, then you can read it for free. Well, kind of, if you're part of the program.
And then I should also mention, too, that if you want a sampler, we have a couple of opportunities for samplers in this group because everyone here except for Darynda participated in the Seasons of Sorcery. Oh, that kind of echoed. Anthology. So that would be a great way to start with all of us. And then shall I spill the beans? This seems like a good time to spill the beans. We don't have a title yet, but Darynda, Amanda, Grace, and I are going to be doing a midwinter holiday anthology this year that should be out in November at some point. So that is also an opportunity to sample. And then Grace and I are in one that's Under a Winter Sky that came out last fall with Kelly, last Christmas time, midwinter holiday time, with Kelly Armstrong and Melissa Marr. And who am I forgetting? Yumi.
Let's see. No, it was just the 4 of us, right? No, Leslie Penelope.
Leslie Penelope. How can I forget Leslie? Oh, Penelope. Yeah. Yes, so people are saying they just got Seasons of Sorcery. All right, so
Nice.
Oh,
I
great.
have a question. It's nice that these get up votes, so that's great. They'll surface those. Do the worlds of your stories come to you first, or do the characters from that world come to you first? And Grace, why don't you lead that one off?
Always the characters first. I build my worlds more or less around my characters. Probably Master of Prose is an excellent example of that. The hero Silhar of Neath more or less just burst into my head one time, and I just built the entire world around him. He was very loud in my head, and I just started writing. So yeah, I always defer to character first, and the worlds get built around that.
Okay, Jennifer.
I agree with Grace. I write in first person. So for me, the story is all about the heroine, who she is, what she wants, what kind of magic she has, how she can use her powers to defeat the bad guys. So I think about the heroine first, and then like Grace said, I start to build the world around her.
Darynda?
Yep. Every once in a while, I might get like a plot point or something that I want to include, but then it always, even if I do that, it's not the world. It's like a what if situation, but then it still always boils down to the characters. They're what keep readers coming back, and yeah.
What about you, Amanda?
Well, that was definitely true when I launched both series. It was the heroine who was in my head and had her voice and her story that needed to be told, and then the world was built around her. It's a little different for the book that I'm finishing up right now. So it's actually got a title, which I forgot to mention. It's called A Curse of Queens.
Ooh, I like that.
I like that.
title.
Thank you. And so that I already had the world established, and I already had a huge cast of characters established from the original trilogy. So these two characters, who are the main characters of this book, they're Flynn and Jocasta, if you know the characters from the original trilogy. They were all there already. So the challenge in this case for me was doing something totally different, because I wasn't building from a character and then the world from the ground up. So it was a totally different experience writing these characters who I already knew. Some readers will already know them too. Some readers won't. And so it was a kind of a juggling act to create them in a way that readers who are new to the series will relate to, in ways that readers that are familiar with the series will just get what they need out of it. And the world is already there. And it's so clear in my mind already that it's hard not to, it's hard to parcel out the information also. So it was a completely a different beast for me to write this first Kingmaker spinoff. But interesting and different, flexing different muscles, we'll say.
Yeah, and for me, it's always character, and then I build the world from walking around with the characters and discovering it with them. I guess since I'm a weird intuitive writer, I don't plan what I'm doing very much. Let's see. I'm trying to pick questions that aren't too specific for. So this is a good one. I'm trying not to pick the ones that are only for certain people. We can come around to those. But this is a question of, do any of you have technical backgrounds? Is this required for science fiction romance writing? And I know not all of us are writing science fiction romance, but I am interested to hear about your technical or academic backgrounds and how that feeds into what you are writing. And Darynda, let's start with you.
I don't have any technical anything. I have actually started 2 different science fiction romance books that I want to write. I was telling Amanda about them one day, and when she was writing Starbreaker, and someday I will get to them. But no, it's just an absolute love for science fiction. Growing up, Star Wars, Star Trek, I was Battlestar Galactica. I was that person. I'm such a space geek. My background, though, is, I mean, I have a bachelor's in sign language interpreting, and you wouldn't think that that would help, but I do have a lot of, I can include that. And one of the things that did was it teaches you, because ASL obviously is a different language. And so it teaches you how to look at language in a different way and how to, from different points of view. And it was very interesting getting that. And of course, I do have some deaf characters in my books every once in a while. My oldest son is deaf, so I bring that in just because I want to, spread the good word.
What do you say, Grace?
Yeah, obviously, with the difficulties I have with operating my own phone, technology is not my strong point. And I got a bachelor's of arts in Russian studies, so that is way far away from any technology. Luckily, I do have a husband who is super mechanically inclined, loves astronomy, and so can really act as a reference point for me if I have, some questions about certain things. And God bless YouTube for, other things that can, give you a little bit more expansive knowledge for people like me who are technically challenged, with various details that you can incorporate. Because I am working on a science fiction romance novella, and I have to try and understand, oh my gosh, all kinds of things. The idea of, halo drives, and there's something called space foam, and, all kinds of weird, the idea of the wormhole, and does it actually exist? And there's like slingshots through black holes. And so a lot of that is, at first when I approach it, is a little bit beyond my understanding. And then I'll go to my husband, or I'll go and look at YouTube again. They'll explain it, in fifth grader terms for me, so that I can write about it.
What about you, Jennifer?
I too have recently written a science fiction romance, although I'm calling mine more like magic. It's mostly magic with a little bit of science and technology thrown in, because science is not my favorite thing. So I have a bachelor's in English and journalism, and then I have a master's degree in professional communications. And I worked for a daily newspaper for more than 10 years, before I was a full-time author. I was a general assignment reporter for a while. I covered the police beat, part-time for a while. And then I moved over to the features department, which was a lot of interviewing people, artists, authors, anybody that had like more of a feel-good kind of a story. And then I also, copy edited stories and designed newspaper pages. So I kind of know a little bit about a lot of different things. But, I would say that working at the newspaper did teach me how to, just kind of write quickly and just get your first draft done. And then you can go back and edit it and really polish it and, make it perfect. So that was something that's helped me as a writer, although it's not really that technical.
And Amanda?
Well, I just had a visitor, so I'll show off my beautiful cat. Her name is Artemis. So my background is in French language and education. That was my bachelor's degree, and I have a master's in French language and literature. So absolutely nothing to do with what I ended up doing. Writing, even before I became a published author, it had nothing to do with what I ended up doing, because I ended up moving to France. And so my goal of becoming a French teacher in the US kind of got thrown out the window, because I would have had to start a whole nother cycle in order to teach French here. And I also wasn't sure I wanted to teach French to French people, because while my French is good, it's not, a native speaker either. So that was all basically many years of higher education for, I guess I live in France, so it's useful. But otherwise, I have zero scientific background, and I call my Night Chaser series science fantasy, because I am very light on the science, and I don't really care if it makes sense or doesn't. It just needs to fit the story. And when I have specific questions, like a black hole or a wormhole or something like that, or how gravity works, I also will turn to Google and YouTube and a lot of my Googling is also to do with like fight scenes and how certain moves affect someone else, like a chokehold, and what does that do, and what does it look like, and things like that. So I can describe those with some accuracy. But in terms of science, it's not really important to me that it's sciencey. In fact, that's not the point for me. The point is a sweeping adventure that'll sweep a reader away, sure, into a different world. And yeah, I don't want it to be completely, based in nonsense, of course, either. So there's kind of there's a mix of stuff that I make up and stuff that I look up and I try and describe, with some accuracy. And otherwise, in fantasy worlds, it's if you can dream it up and describe it, then it's good to go for your books. So
I think I'm an outlier in this group because I actually do have a scientific background. I thought I was going to be a research scientist, and was in the midst of getting my PhD in neurophysiology when I decided I'd rather be a writer. So, but I do actually use my science in creating my fantasy worlds because I know a lot about ecology and physiology and that sort of thing, and I build those into my creatures and stuff. But Mary Lynn commented in the chat there that it's interesting how many of us focused on language in different ways. And, I also, studied French all through high school and college and a smattering of other languages. And I do think that's like part of our medium. We get so fascinated by words and how words are built and so forth. All right, so I am looking for some other questions for all of us. Okay, so this is the perennial question, but I think it's always interesting to discuss is, what is your process? The question is plotter or pantser, and any of you who know me know that I really hate the term pantser. So we're going to do an X on pantser, but do you pre-plot your books or do you garden? Are you an architect? Do you mist as you write? Let's see. And I will start this time with Jennifer.
Well, I will say the P word we're not allowed to say. I will say discovery writer. That has
there you go. That's a good one too.
Nicer ring to it. But in layman's terms, yes, I'm a total pantser. Like I said before, I think about my heroine and her magic and how she can use it to defeat the bad guys. I think about kind of the big turning points of the book, like what kicks off the action, kind of what happens in the middle, and then what the big fight scene is at the end, because I love writing a fight scene, or 5 or 6 or 7 in a book. And then I just sit down and start writing, and I am kind of like one of those weird artists that just is like throwing water balloons filled with paint at a wall and trying to see what sticks. And it's a mess when I get done with the first draft, but then I can go back and kind of like wipe the smears away, and then the story starts to take shape for me.
All right, then I'm going to go to someone I know is not a Write for Discovery writer. That's another one. Ms. Darynda.
So I am quite the plotter. I just have to know where I'm going, or I just go in directions I feel like I shouldn't have gone. And then I absolutely hate deleting. I hate it. And that's what happens if I don't plot. I know every minute of every book. I will say I'm getting a little better. So my outlines are normally about 60 pages long. But I will say,
she writes incredible outlines, you guys. They're unreal.
I will say that I'm trying to reel back a little bit on that. I think my outline for what is it called? Hard Day for a Hangover. I think it's only like 35 pages long, something like that. So
only 35 pages long.
Well, one of the things that I do, and Jeffe made a really good point. One of the things that I do is when dialogue and stuff comes to me, I will write the whole scene just in dialogue, And I would say honestly that 95% of my first draft was dialogue, and I'd have to go in and plug the other stuff in. But what happens is when I do that in the outline, I can never use the whole thing. I can only use bits and pieces of it, and I have to figure out where this can go and what I can do with that. And so I'm actually trying not to she calls it pre-writing. I'm actually trying not to pre-write. So that's why it's only 35 pages long. I'm like, unless like a really great line comes to me, a joke or something, and then I'll put it in there. But entire scenes with dialogue, I'm trying to reel back on that a little bit. But yes, I'm quite the plotter.
Okay, so then from you, I'm going to go to Grace because she is someone else who writes dialogue first.
I do, and I'm just going to totally ignore Jeffe on the whole pantser thing because I fly that banner high. No shame. I am a pantser from my DNA on up, so typically I just sort of sit down, and I do follow a lot of what Jennifer said, and that is throw it against the wall to see what sticks. I don't have a problem. I know some authors do. I don't have a problem with trashing words that I've written, and I've trashed thousands of them and started over. Probably a good example of that with Dragon Unleashed. I completed that at 132,000 words and basically rewrote the book. I threw out everything except 8,000 and started over.
Oh my gosh.
It was bad.
That hurts.
That hurts me. Yeah, in my heart. That hurts me.
I was like,
so that pantsing for me works because I don't have a problem with slinging words into the trash and doing it again. With that being said, probably with one of the best things I've ever heard, and I've mentioned it before in other panels, the author Elizabeth Hunter said, even when the writing isn't getting done, the writing is getting done. So while I may not be plotting it or typing it out, it's always running up here. I've got a constant spool of scenery going on in my head. And that may change as I continue to sit down and write and so forth. But really, the writing is getting done. The typing isn't always getting done, but the writing is always getting done. So, yeah, I totally pants everything. And then now I've lost. What was the thing that you were saying, Jeffe? That Darynda did it?
Answered it, Grace, darling.
What was that?
Well, that you write all of the dialogue first. You
I do.
almost write like a screenplay, and then you go back
I
and fill
basically
in.
treat mine like screenwriting. Yeah, I write the entire book in nothing but dialogue with notes off to the side or in parentheses that says, they're in this room, here's this fight scene, we're traveling on this road. And then once all my dialogue is written for the entire book, I go back in and do scene fill.
Yeah. Okay, Amanda, what's your process?
Interesting.
Well, I'm kind of a mix of everyone here in a way, because I wouldn't say that I don't outline, because I don't sit down and write points out and then follow an outline in that way. But I definitely write in my head. And so I think if I'm outlining, if you want to call it that, it's outlining in my head. So whatever I'm getting down on the computer day by day might just be a small portion, but the book is still forming in my head as I go. And then that, of course, helps me when I get back to the computer, because more of it is in my head to, continue with the writing process. And I think that I might almost write in a way that I don't need to outline, because I'll write maybe 20 or 30 pages in a section, and then I'll reread those and rework them usually before moving on. And this is, I think, not a process that probably works for a lot of people, but it seems to be the one I've established and I can't break out of. But rereading and reworking each section as I go, it helps me understand where I'm going with the characters and the story before I move on. So is it almost like outlining, only I'm doing it really slowly and with the entire, book written out as I do each part? I'm not sure. So it's hard to know where I actually fall on this line of different ways of writing. I definitely don't write down an outline and call it an outline, but I'm outlining in my head, I'm writing and I'm rewriting as I go and reworking things.
And I should clarify that the reason I don't like the word pantser is because I feel like it's a term that's mostly coined by people who prefer to pre-plot and do detailed outlines ahead of time. And so pantser comes from fly by the seat of your pants, which I feel like is applied by people who are frightened by that concept. As opposed to the people who actually do it. You know, Grace and Jennifer can embrace the term. That's perfectly fine. I don't mind. But that's not how it feels to me. It doesn't feel like I am flying by the seat of my pants. It feels like, to me, I like the term gardener that George R. R. Martin uses, as opposed to an architect where you have all the blueprints ahead of time, that you're planting the seeds and seeing what's growing, and you nurture it and you cultivate it and discover the story as it goes. So somebody suggested like discoverer versus detailer, and I wouldn't go with that either, because it's not that people who are intuitive writers or discovery writers don't detail. It's not that we don't plot. It's just that we don't do it before we write the story. And so that's why I object to those terms. I just feel like it's not very accurate.
I like your gardening idea, Jeffe. I think that's sort of what I'm trying to describe. Also,
yeah.
I don't tend to rip up too much of the garden afterwards, like Grace was saying, and throwing it out. But it'll definitely evolve as I go. I think maybe I would rip more up if I moved on more quickly. If I wrote, 200 pages at once, then I would be ripping up 100. But because I move on so slowly, I can kind of replant as I go.
Pejorative is a good word. Oh, and we have 5 minutes left. I think this is a good question for all of us to answer. You'll have to be succinct. And that is, what do you think is the difference between fantasy romance and romantic fantasy? And I will start with Grace on this one.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, we could go to someone else. We could go to Darynda.
Oh, romantic fantasy and fantasy romance. Well, to me, fantasy romance would imply that the romance is more the central to the story, whereas romantic fantasy, the fantasy is the most abundant and I feel like I actually write like paranormal, like romantic paranormal and romantic mystery, because I feel like the mystery is the bigger part for me, and then the romance is not the central story usually.
Anyone want to argue with Darynda on that?
I would just add too that if you're saying fantasy romance, then at some point, whether it's in the first book or if it's a trilogy in the third book, then I expect a happy ending or a happy for now with the characters together. Yes. Don't call it a romance if that's not going to happen in the end. And if you're saying romantic fantasy, I still want the happy ending, but if you don't deliver on it, I'm not going to be quite as pissed off at you as I am if you're marketing it as a fantasy romance.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's the one rule to rule them all, right? That, and since we're doing Bookstore Romance Day, if you're going to call it a romance, you better give us that happy ever after. Don't Nicholas Sparks us on it. Don't.
Screw Nicholas.
Terry Goodkind is another one. Since we're talking about fantasy books, I want to say it's the Sword of Truth series. And I want to say the characters are Richard and Colin. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. And they have all these great obstacles. They spend most of the books together. They get back together at the end, and they are literally happy for about 5 minutes before he breaks them up again. And they're off on, different quests and adventures. So,
yeah.
Okay, so since we're down to the wire here, this is an interesting question, but a lot of us talked about writing in the head and how much of that we kind of dream about and so forth. I think, like that deliberate daydreaming or even non-deliberate daydreaming is a big part of how we do that. One person's asking, how do you live with characters in your heads or stories in your heads? Grace, I'm putting you on the spot.
That's fine on this one. It's actually pretty easy. It's almost like, I don't know, we all function a lot of times with the TV running in the background. It doesn't stop us from doing other things, for, thinking about other stuff, addressing other tasks and so forth. But we're still listening and we're still hearing what's going on. So for me, that's more or less how it works for me, is that my internal TV with these characters in it is always on. It's always in the background. I'm always listening to it. But at the same time, it doesn't, really interfere with anything else I'm doing. I mean, I can be filling out taxes and so forth, and it's still running, and it's not really an issue. It's just, you get so used to it, I think, that it just becomes part of your daily thought process in a way, And so, like, if somebody wants to pop a question at you, God forbid they ask you, so tell me about your next book, then you're really bending their ear because you have all this information that's always spooling back there. So, yeah.
Yep.
And not necessarily sequential either, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, mine's all over the map. Like I said, well, I can tell you the last chapter on, book 6. Well, have you written book 6? No.
Anyone else have anything to add on that?
It's just a constant. Yeah. It's just the way our brains work, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't feel like my characters talk to me like some writers say, but I will space out. I'll, like I wake up in the morning and the story's going in my head, or I'll be like Grace was talking about cooking dinner or something like that. And my husband will ask me a question and I'll have absolutely no context for what he's talking about. And it's like, what does this have to do with what's going on in my head? Absolutely nothing.
And does anyone else have trouble sleeping sometimes? I'll wake up and then the story will start writing in my head.
Yeah.
And then I'll be awake for 3 hours because it's so exciting. I just want to keep going.
Yeah.
And I usually remember
go ahead,
be able to write it down.
Yeah.
Well,
I will say, like, sometimes when I get at bed at night, something that kind of helps me to relax is I will think about, what chapter do I need to write the next day, or, what does this character need to do, or whatever. And then, like, I'm asleep 10 minutes later and I've just forgotten the whole thing.
Oh no! See, it keeps me awake. Or I don't have trouble falling asleep, but then if I wake up, that horrible 2-3 a.m. wake up, I won't go back to sleep because I'll be like, ooh, and this, ooh, and that, and then but I don't want to get up either because I'm in bed. And I just don't want to sleep. So but I keep going and going and going, and sometimes it lasts for hours. And when I'm really into a book and that's when I'm plotting. You see, that's why I say I am plotting somewhere in my head.
So we're going to, they're saying thank you to us very pointedly, which means I think we have to shut up now. But it was really wonderful to chat with you all. You guys obviously could tell we're all friends, so this is fun for us to do. You can buy books from Beasley Books. The homepage should be fixed now. You can also go to bookshop.org. You can find us all on our various websites. I think we're pretty easy to find. So look us up, ask us questions on social media. And this has been really fun to do. Support your local indie if they support.
Thank you, guys. Happy Romance Day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.